3 million pills. These pills were stamped as oxycodone. Let that sink in. 3 million.
They found multiple types of drugs in pill and powder form. Specifically, investigators say they found over 56 kilos of fentanyl. Agents say it found enough to kill everyone in Georgia, at least.
On paper, the property was empty. A private desert retreat outside Palm Springs. No registered residents. No active business license. No event permits. No deliveries under the owner's name. But for 3 months, federal drones kept seeing the same thing after midnight. Black SUVs arriving with no plates, cargo trucks backing into a fake maintenance shed, and heat signatures moving underground where, according to county records, there was nothing but rock. By the time FBI and DEA teams moved on the compound, the case had already grown far beyond a raid. It had become a map. A map of hidden money, contraband routes, encrypted marketplaces, celebrity access, and a black book so sensitive that DOJ officials locked it inside a sealed evidence room before most agents even knew what they had found. And at the center of it all was a man almost nobody had heard of. A fixer named Victor Marlane. The public knew the compound by a softer name, the Mirador Estate. A 700-acre desert property sitting beyond a private road near the edge of the Coachella Valley. From the outside, it looked like a luxury wellness retreat that had never fully opened. Beige stone walls, imported palms, solar panels, meditation terraces facing the mountains. Locals thought it belonged to one of those Hollywood investment groups that bought land, built something strange, then abandoned it when tax incentives changed. That explanation worked for years, until a DEA field office in Los Angeles began tracking a pattern that didn't fit. It started with seizures across 3 cities: Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Phoenix. Different crews, different couriers, different warehouses, but the same encrypted payment tags kept appearing in the ledgers. Not names, not phone numbers, 3 words: desert table access. At first, agents thought it was a darknet vendor label. Then financial analysts traced the phrase through shell companies, private security invoices, crypto wallets, and one offshore account tied to a Nevada entertainment trust. That trust had no employees, no office, no public-facing business, but it had moved almost $1.4 billion in 18 months. That was the first crack. The second crack came from a traffic stop outside Barstow. California Highway Patrol pulled over a refrigerated truck for a broken rear light. The driver said he was hauling imported seafood to a catering company in Beverly Hills. The paperwork looked clean, but the truck was too cold. The manifest said fresh fish. The refrigeration unit was set for medical-grade storage. When DEA agents inspected the trailer, they found nothing in the cargo bay. Then one technician noticed the floor sat 6 inches higher than it should have. Underneath it was a sealed compartment packed with vacuum-wrapped bricks, encrypted phones, and a ledger printed on waterproof paper. One page carried a delivery code: Mirador/Northgate/ after 0200. That single line turned a trafficking investigation into a federal operation. The FBI joined first, then the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit, then Homeland Security Investigations. By the end of the month, DOJ prosecutors in Washington were reviewing evidence under a sealed case file known internally as Operation Sandglass. The name came from the pattern. Money went in one end. People, products, favors, and silence came out the other. And nobody could explain how it had run for so long without a leak. The Mirador estate was not owned directly by Victor Marlane. That would have been too obvious. The land was held by a chain of companies: a film financing LLC in Delaware, a wellness brand in Arizona, an art logistics firm in Miami, and a charitable foundation registered in Wyoming. On paper, the foundation promoted desert conservation. In reality, it had paid for reinforced underground construction, private satellite uplinks, and a biometric entry system usually seen in military subcontractor facilities. That was when agents stopped calling it a mansion. They started calling it the compound. A physical scene changed everything. One night, surveillance watched a convoy arrive at 1:37 a.m. Not luxury cars, utility vehicles, a white box truck, 2 matte black Range Rovers, a van marked as a private medical transport. The convoy entered through the north gate, then disappeared behind a maintenance shed near a dry wash. Agents expected the vehicles to come out an hour later. They didn't. For 4 hours, nothing moved above ground. Then a thermal drone picked up heat blooming beneath the shed, spreading out in straight lines under the desert floor. Hallways, rooms, machinery. The estate wasn't abandoned. It was inverted. The real compound was underground. But the question was no longer what was hidden there. The question was who had enough money, influence, and protection to build it. Victor Marlane had spent 20 years being useful to powerful people. He was not an actor, not a producer, not a politician. He was the man behind doors, a crisis manager for celebrities, a financing broker for independent films, a nightlife investor in Las Vegas, a fixer who could make reputations disappear, debts move offshore, and impossible introductions happen at private dinners where nobody allowed phones. Former clients described him as calm, expensive, and impossible to impress. Federal investigators described him differently. They believed Marlane had built something that looked like a social network for the elite but functioned like a criminal exchange. Access was the product. Secrecy was the currency. And the Mirador estate was the marketplace. Still, agents needed more than patterns. They needed the inside. That came from a woman named Lena Torres, a financial compliance officer at a boutique bank in Century City. Lena wasn't looking for a criminal empire. She was reviewing flagged transfers from a film fund that claimed to be financing international productions. The numbers made no sense. Millions went to catering companies that had no kitchens, security vendors that shared mailing addresses, consulting firms created 3 days before receiving 7-figure payments. Then she found one invoice labeled Set Infrastructure. Amount, $18.6 million. Recipient, Mirage Earthworks. Project site, Riverside County. But Mirage Earthworks had no construction license, and its listed owner had died 4 years earlier. Lena filed a suspicious activity report. 2 weeks later, someone slid an envelope under her apartment door. Inside was a printed photo of her younger brother leaving work. No note, no demand, just a message without words. She almost withdrew the report. Instead, she called a federal hotline. That call gave investigators their first civilian witness who could connect the money to intimidation. But it also proved something darker. The network was watching people inside legitimate institutions. The compound had reach. The raid was planned for a Tuesday. Not because Tuesdays are dramatic, because traffic patterns around the estate were weakest before dawn, and analysts believed a major transfer was scheduled between 3 o'clock and 5 a.m. Federal teams staged in 3 locations, Palm Springs, Indio, and a closed stretch of service road near Desert Hot Springs. FBI tactical units handled entry. DEA handled contraband. IRSCI handled financial evidence. HSI handled foreign asset links. Local sheriff's deputies blocked the outer road. The warrant was sealed but broad. Search and seizure of currency, controlled substances, weapons, servers, encrypted devices, ledgers, identity documents, and records related to trafficking, money laundering, racketeering, obstruction, and public corruption. At 4:18 a.m., power to the main residence cut out. At 4:21, agents breached the first gate. By 4:25, the desert was full of rotor wash, floodlights, and shouted commands. The first surprise was that the mansion itself was nearly empty. No party. No celebrities. No visible cash. No vault. Just marble floors, art crates, and a silent kitchen with breakfast already prepared for people who were not there. For a moment, it looked like the raid had missed its window. Then AK-9 units stopped at the maintenance shed. The shed smelled like machine oil and dust. Inside were tools, paint buckets, and a wall of stacked tires. An agent noticed the tires were too clean. No desert grit. No wear. Behind them was a steel panel disguised as drywall. When the breaching team opened it, they found an elevator. No button. Just a biometric scanner and a red emergency stop switch. The first underground level looked like a private bunker. The second looked like a bank. And the third looked like the back end of an international marketplace. Cinematic insert. Imagine the elevator doors opening onto a corridor lit by emergency red strips. Agents step out with rifles raised. On both sides, glass rooms stretch into the darkness. One room holds server racks blinking blue. Another holds steel cages stacked with sealed evidence bags. At the end of the hallway, a vault door stands open, and cash is piled so high it looks unreal. The official count took days. But the preliminary estimates stunned even veteran investigators. $8.5 billion in hidden cash, bearer instruments, crypto recovery keys, gold-backed certificates, and offshore account access codes. Not all of it was paper money. That mattered. Because the headline number was not simply what agents could carry out. It was what the compound controlled. In one vault, agents found US dollars bundled by Federal Reserve District. In another, euros, pounds, dirhams, pesos, and Swiss francs. Behind a false wall, they found hard wallets labeled with symbols instead of names. Some had been wiped. Some were locked. Some contained keys tied to dark web escrow accounts. Then DEA agents reached the storage tunnels. 40 tons of contraband. Not in one pile. Organized like inventory. Color-coded tags. Temperature zones. Shipping labels. Medical packaging. Luxury art crates. Fake charity supplies. The system was not chaotic. It was corporate. Every container had a route, a buyer class, a risk rating, and a delivery window. One DEA supervisor later said the most disturbing thing was not the volume. It was the professionalism. This was not a gang hiding product in a basement. This was a logistics company pretending not to exist. But the biggest discovery was not in the vaults. It was in the server room. Behind 2 reinforced doors, FBI cyber agents found a private rack system cooled by industrial units buried under the West Terrace. The servers connected to redundant satellite links and 3 disguised fiber routes. Inside was a dark web access portal known only by its internal name, the Velvet Room. It was not a marketplace anyone could browse. It was invitation only. Members were ranked by color tiers: silver for buyers, gold for brokers, black for protected accounts, and one tier that cyber agents had never seen before: Ivory. The Ivory accounts did not buy. They requested private flights, sealed introductions, evidence destruction, identity resets, political favors, media suppression, encrypted deliveries. The portal had message logs, transaction records, and partial profile data. But sitting in one offline backup was the file that changed the case: VIP_blackbook_final. The moment agents opened the index, the command post went quiet. Not because every name was famous, because many were not. Studio executives, bankers, tech investors, former law enforcement contractors, private security owners, a judge's aide, a retired customs official, a city procurement consultant, a celebrity doctor, a political fundraiser. The list was not just Hollywood. It was infrastructure. That was the deeper reveal. The Hollywood elite angle was only the visible layer. It got attention. It explained the private jets and the secret parties and the luxury cars. But the system didn't survive because famous people used it. It survived because invisible people protected it. That was the mid-twist. For weeks, investigators believed Victor Marlane was bribing officials to avoid detection. Then they found evidence suggesting something worse. One of the system's earliest architects had once worked inside federal contracting. Not as an agent, not as a prosecutor, as a technology consultant hired to build secure evidence transfer systems for law enforcement vendors. His name was Adrian Vale. For years, Vale had specialized in chain-of-custody software, encrypted logging, and surveillance blind spots. He knew how agencies tracked digital evidence. He knew what triggered alerts. He knew how task forces communicated. And according to the Mirador files, he had used that knowledge to build a criminal network designed to look like background noise. Marlane was the face. Vale was the engineer. That changed everything. The FBI was no longer just asking who paid whom. They were asking whether parts of the system had been designed to survive federal scrutiny from the beginning. And that raised a terrifying possibility. How many cases had failed because someone like Vale knew exactly where to hide the trail? The human impact came through the smallest files. Not the cache. Not the celebrity aliases. Not the encrypted wallets. A folder named Soft Leverage. Inside were personal records, debt histories, rehab admissions, immigration fears, custody disputes, medical vulnerabilities, embarrassing videos, private messages. People were not just customers. Some were trapped. One file belonged to a young assistant named Maya Keene. She had moved to Los Angeles from Sacramento to work in film publicity. Her first job paid barely enough to cover rent. A producer invited her to a private event, saying it would help her career. Her name later appeared in the Velvet Room notes as useful, financially exposed, socially ambitious. Within 6 months, her bank account had received payments from 3 shell companies. She told agents she thought she was arranging travel and guest lists. Then she was asked to deliver sealed envelopes. Then burner phones. Then people. When she tried to quit, someone emailed her mother a photo taken outside her apartment. Maya was never wealthy, never powerful, never famous. But the machine used her anyway. Another file involved a former stunt coordinator named Daniel Reyes. He had worked in Hollywood for 15 years before an injury ended his career. Marlane's network recruited him through a security company, offering cash work at private desert events. Daniel told agents he thought he was guarding rich people doing things they didn't want photographed. Then he saw a teenager brought through a service entrance crying. He reported it to his supervisor. The next week, his mortgage lender received anonymous documents accusing him of fraud. His account was frozen. His contract vanished. His reputation collapsed before he understood who he had crossed. That was how the compound stayed quiet. Not just money, pressure. Not just threats, systems. By sunrise, the Mirador raid had expanded into arrests across 5 states: Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Miami, New York, Scottsdale. Federal agents executed warrants at a private aviation office, 2 law firms, a crypto recovery company, 3 storage facilities, and a medical concierge service. A hangar in Van Nuys held modified luggage compartments. A Miami office held passports under false identities. A Las Vegas penthouse held ledgers hidden inside framed movie posters. But Victor Marlane was not at the compound. That absence nearly broke the case open. Agents found his bedroom untouched. Closet full. Watch case full. Passport drawer empty. He had left less than 12 hours before the raid. Not casually. Precisely. Security footage showed him walking through the West Tunnel at 6:09 p.m. the previous evening. No panic. No rush. He carried one leather bag and spoke to someone on an encrypted phone. The leak was real. Someone had warned him. For the next 48 hours, the operation became a chase. Marlane's private jet was grounded at a small airport outside Las Vegas, but he never boarded it. His credit cards went dark. His known phones were dead. Then HSI flagged a maritime booking under a false identity connected to an art broker from Monaco. Destination, Cabo San Lucas. But that was bait. The real movement came from a medical transport flight leaving Phoenix for Costa Rica. On board was a patient listed as a cardiac transfer. The patient's face was bandaged. The paperwork was signed by a doctor whose name appeared in the blackbook. Federal marshals intercepted the flight before takeoff. The patient was not Victor Marlane. It was Adrian Vale, the engineer. He had cash, 2 drives, and a handwritten list of names. At the top of that list was a single phrase: Marlane knows about Ivory. Vale talked faster than prosecutors expected. Not because he was remorseful. Because he was afraid. He claimed Marlane had lost control of the system months earlier. The Ivory tier, he said, had become too powerful. It no longer served the compound. It used the compound. That was the final realization. Mirador was not the top. It was a hub, a vault, a meeting place, a firewall between the visible world and a darker private economy where influence could be bought without leaving fingerprints. Marlane built the door. Vale built the lock. But other people had been walking through it. 3 days later, Victor Marlane was found in a rented house outside Santa Fe. No shootout. No dramatic escape. He was sitting at a kitchen table with a laptop open and a glass of water beside him. When agents entered, he raised his hands and said only one thing: "You don't understand what you opened." Maybe that was arrogance. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was the first honest thing he had said in years. Because after the raid, the fallout did not move like a normal criminal case. It moved like a controlled demolition. Executives resigned for personal reasons. A private bank announced an internal review. A streaming company paused a major production. A lobbying firm quietly removed 2 partners from its website. Several public figures denied ever visiting the estate before anyone publicly accused them of doing so. And DOJ officials refused to release the full black book, citing ongoing investigations, privacy concerns, and national security sensitivities. That decision created the debate federal prosecutors probably wanted to avoid. How much should the public know? If the names stay sealed, people assume the powerful are being protected. If the names come out too early, innocent people can be destroyed by association. That tension became the legacy of Operation Sandglass. Not just what was found, but what remained hidden. The $8.5 billion showed the scale. The 40 tons of contraband showed the reach. The dark web VIP black book showed the access. But the real story was more uncomfortable than any headline. A system like Mirador doesn't exist because one villain is clever. It exists because enough people benefit from not asking questions. A banker approves the transfer. A lawyer builds the shell. A driver ignores the cargo. A guard turns away from the door. A consultant designs the blind spot. A famous face provides cover. And somewhere in the middle, ordinary people like Maya and Daniel get pulled into a machine powerful enough to rewrite their lives. That is what made the desert compound so disturbing. It wasn't hidden because it was small. It was hidden because too many people had reasons not to see it. By the time the last evidence truck left the Mirador estate, the sun was rising over the mountains. The mansion looked calm again. Palm trees, stone walls, empty terraces. But below ground, agents had marked every room with evidence tape. The vault, the server chamber, the storage tunnels, the elevator behind the fake tires. A luxury retreat had become a crime scene. A rumor had become a federal case. And a hidden empire had finally been dragged into daylight. But the Black Book still raises the question that won't go away. If a system like this can exist beneath institutions people trust, protected by money, status, and silence, what does that say about everything we never get to see? And what matters more? Exposing every name at any cost, or proving the full system before the most powerful people inside it have a chance to escape?